Hi guys. So this is our last lecture. So I'm gonna touch upon the mixed. What does it mean with the mixed methods? How can we kind of apply both quantitative and qualitative methods to apply this to one research on the same problem, and what triangulation mean? And I'll touch upon the philosophy of science as I promised. And I delayed it to the very last week, and I had to talk about this in week 2 or 3. So again, we are talking about research design and how to kind of make rigorous or to design it rigorously, and to have like a logical structure of research inquiry, to have like, you know, a clear structure and the logical processes in order to formulate a research question first, and then to offer an answer and to solve the puzzling question in the end. And in the process, you have like a framework in order to marshal evidence or to generate and analyze data as well. So it's a process of like, you know, how to have like to formulate a research question, and then to engage in the theoretical debates, and then how to transform this into like a feasible project in order to provide answer. In order to transform this into like a research project, you need like to pick on or to select the best method that would like help you marshal evidence and increase your explanatory leverage to test the hypothesis, and then answer the question, to give like, you know, a plausible and satisfactory answer to increase the inferential leverage of your research. This is why, you know, we talked about, you know, this research like design, starting from how you pick like a topic, and then how you can formulate a puzzling question, and then you after conducting a literature review, and why you have to clarify your concepts and to distinguish between the concepts and other like, you know, similar ones, and to offer, you know, some good measures to the concepts you selected. So the question is how to collect the best evidence in order to test your hypotheses, in order to answer the question in the end. We examined like several tools in order to collect data and to marshal like, and to increase the explanatory leverage of your research. So we talked about like the focus groups and the interview data, participant observation, and like discourse analysis and surveys as well. And sometimes I know like we didn't like go deep into quantitative methods, but like some like basic level of information I need you to know at this stage. Sometimes you construct the data set by yourself. So I showed you kind of surveys, but sometimes you have like a puzzling question and you need to construct your own data set. So some like available there exists, you know, some available data, and I showed you like the R parameter as like one of the surveys, you know, you can make use of. There's like, you know, the World Bank data as well, and the World Values Survey. So for example, if you are interested in a question regarding unemployment rate and social development in like, you know, several countries and over a long period of time, so you need to construct what's called like a panel time series and cross-sectional data set. So you have like, you know, some sources you can like, you know, pick and choose, you know, the variables of interest, and then you can have like your own data set and to run your own models. So for example, if you are interested in, I picked on like the unemployment rate between female, the percentage of the female labor force, and then you have a link, you know, so you can like pick any other, you know, variable of interest. So and then you can click on this, and then you have like here on the right hand side you have like a download and different versions. And then you will get like, you know, the Excel sheet with like several countries with the code and like the years as well. And then you can combine, the data set. If you can select the countries you want and the variables actually you're interested in, and they are like useful for your research. And then you can have your you construct your own data set. And then you have like the world value survey as well. I mentioned this like several times in class. So you have like several waves, so you can compare like like between answers over time. And you have here the online analysis. You have a link to these surveys. And then you have like the questions. You might pick on like how people like the importance of democracy, for example. 140, the variable, the question number. So you can like click on the variable of interest, and then you can it would tell you the percentage of the, or the division of the answers between the respondents. So sometimes we need to combine quantitative and qualitative methods to increase this inferential leverage. So you need like, you have like the same like research, and you have like only one problem, and you can apply two techniques or like two methodological tools to bear on the subject, or to answer the question. So for example, you have like in your readings, Taro, for example, tried to investigate the cycles of protest in Italy during the late 60s. And he conducted, one qualitative study on Florence, how to, and basically on the community, the Catholic communities, or community-based Catholic community in Florence, and how actually he applied this discourse analysis in order to see how the actually with the emergence of the student movements and workers' strikes as well, they affected the base communities there, in order to initiate a cycle of protest. And then to increase the leverage, he collected data, cross-section data in Italy, because like Florence was one of many cities that actually witnessed these cycles of protest during that period. And he collected some data regarding the cycles of protest in other cities, in order to conduct this cross-section analysis, to make sure that there is kind of a linkage or a link between different cycles of protest, like student movements and workers' strikes, how they inspired different communities and different actors in order to initiate their own protest. And you can apply this to like any other. It depends on the question, the selection of the methods. It all depends on the question you need to answer, and how available the availability of the data as well. So one here, like with the quantitative, you can have like you can graph the findings or the results, and then you can select the cases, or you can like go into this qualitative methods based on the quantitative findings. This is very common. Like here, when you finish your applied statistics, and if you have like advanced level of statistics and quantitative methods, so you will get to know how to plot the observations, and how to create graphs out of the findings, or the models you're gonna run. And from like the observations here, so you have like some cases that like fall on and off the best, we call it the best fitting line, the regression line. So here, like H here, it could be like an outlier or something, so it might be interesting case in order to investigate. So you can select the case based on the quantitative findings, and then you can, or perhaps you can have A and H, and then one of the cases or the observations that actually it falls on the best fitting line. So the case selection here will depend on the findings or the statistical results and the findings you achieve. And then you can have, like, you combine, you know, this quantitative and qualitative methods in order to increase, you know, the explanatory leverage or inferential leverage of your research. But I just want you to, to know some of the terminologies, and you need to, like, you know, you cannot finish, you know, you cannot end like a course on methodology without knowing what ecological fallacy and individualistic fallacy are. So one of the main, like, you know, shortcomings of the statistical techniques or results, you need to pay attention to what's called ecological fallacy and individualistic fallacy as well. So what is ecological fallacy? So you have, like, data, you're handling kind of like data set or data at the like the aggregate level, like collectivities, like, you know, like the state or whatever, like, you know, it's not like individual level, it's kind of aggregate level. And you try, while handling, you know, this data, so you're making, like, you know, inferences without examining the relationship among these, like, you know, the aggregate level or the collectivities, and to what extent they correspond to the individual or the data you collected at the individual level. So, for example, if you have, like, you know, a data set on, like, the socioeconomic marginalization, you know, in cities or whatever, and then you need to examine this, the socioeconomic status or the marginalization, the impact on individual behavior, like electoral turnout or something like this. Sometimes, like, you know, you don't have, like, data that would tell you, like, you know, something about the socioeconomic status of the individuals. You cannot disaggregate, you know, this data, and then you will make inference, you know, from this aggregate data to to establish, you know, kind of causality, and to make, like, you know, conclusion about the individual data or the individual turnout. So you establish, like, you know, this relationship at the aggregate level that does not correspond to the data you collected at the individual level. So make sure, like, you know, you have to pay attention to the levels of analysis and the data collected at what level. And then individualistic fallacy or reductionist fallacy, it's quite the opposite. So you try to generalize from individual behavior to the aggregate level or the aggregative relationship. So you try to draw conclusion about groups or, like, you know, certain collectivities based on individual data. So if you have, like, you know, data about, like, survey data or public opinion survey, like that asks actually people about, or individuals about, you know, their support for democracy, and then you generalize or you draw conclusion if, like, you know, the like 70%, you know, they responded that they do support democracy, and then you try to draw conclusion for how, like, democratic institutions at the society at large, for the society at large, function. It doesn't, like, you know, you move between different levels of analysis and you try to draw conclusions, you know, from this individual level data to the aggregate level data. So pay attention to these, like, you know, pitfalls or statistical shortcoming. Yeah, some other, like, you know, terminologies as well. So you need to know what validity and reliability and replicability are. So for validity, it has something to do with the measurement of the concept. We spent some time talking about you have to make sure, if you remember, like, you know, like thick concepts and thin description. So you have to make sure, this is like what Coppage mentioned, you have to make sure that you really measure what you wanna, or what you want, or what you think you're really measuring. So it has something to do with how to capture, you know, the dimensions the multiple dimensions of the concept. So for democracy, if you need to examine, for example, like the electoral procedures, so you need to make sure that the measures you select, they actually capture the dimension, the procedural and the electoral dimension of democracy. So you cannot like talk about like political participation and then you have like no, this is not like, you cannot talk about like the accountability and responsiveness of the government, and then you can go for Freedom House that actually the indicators measure, you know, the freedom of assembly and expression. So you might go to like, you know, Polity Project and select, you know, some indicators or some measures that actually capture, you know, the concept you need to examine. If you define political participation that like, you know, in terms of like electoral voting or turnout, so make sure that you capture this quantitatively well. And if you focus on like, you know, participation in like demonstrations or signing petitions, contacting and reaching out to parliamentary candidates or whatever, so you need to opt for measurement that actually capture the dimensions of the concept. And you can run like, you know, what's called robustness check. So you can have like different, and if it's really like, you know, there is like a correlation between the two variables, if you run like this with different measures, you will find, you know, the exact relationship between the concepts. If you believe, or if it's like statistically significant that democracy kind of affects like women position, or like, you know, a kind of like civic culture or whatever. So if you have like different measures of democracy, you will find, you know, somehow this relationship between, or the correlation between the two variables under investigation. Reliability, it has something to do with the results. So if you have like, if you run like a specific model and you reach, you know, some statistical findings and results, so I can apply the same like procedures and I'll get, you know, the same results. So it has kind of it has to be kind of reliable. So we can, that's why sometimes, as I mentioned, some people like would deal with participant observations and some like, you know, qualitative techniques or tools as kind of unreliable, like the documentaries and primary sources, because like, you know, it differs, you know, from it reads differently between individuals. So that's why sometimes they call it what the conclusions or the results of these studies, as I mentioned before, it's not reliable, and they might produce just, you know, provisional hypotheses to be like, you know, tested in future studies. And then replicability, it has something to do with the methods rather than the results. So here it's out of kind of intellectual honesty. You have to tell like scholars, you know, how you operationalize, you know, your concepts and how you establish, you know, your data sets. And this is like, you know, for would enable them, you know, to use it or to replicate, you know, the findings, or maybe to refine the findings later. So sometimes I think one of you contacted me about, you know, this replicability, and sometimes, you know, like some scholars, you know, would make the data set available at their website, available for replication. In order to use, you know, the same data set, the constructed, and to the same, like, you know, measures or operationalization measures, you know, they used for the concept, in order to use to use, you know, the same measures or the same method in future studies. Yeah. So now, like, we have some sort of changes. So I have, like, you know, to allocate only 20% of the total of the coursework grades to the, I'll opt for, you know, your second assignment, the one of the week 6, and the last article review you submitted last week. But pay attention to, like, now we have, like, 80% is allocated for your research proposal. So please, like, take the comments seriously, the comments I made on your literature review. If it's your, and preferably this will be like your the topic for your research proposal, so make sure you integrate all the comments. So the grades do not, like, count right now for the literature review, but if you, like, if you write it, if you improve on this in order to write a good research proposal, so it would be it would help you with the final research proposal. And then you don't have grades after all. It's kind of pass or fail, but I'll have, like, criteria against which I'll evaluate your research proposals as well. So first of all, you need to write an introduction to the topic. Okay, so you have to introduce your topic. I'm gonna offer you some examples, but these are, like, the points I need to find and I look for in your research proposals. So here you have, like, introduction to the topic, and you state clearly, it's like a short introduction, and then you state clearly your research question, and then the literature review, and then like, if you have, like, a theory or a hypothesis to be tested, so you have to write it, like, after the literature review. And then if you have a case or cases, but I'm not sure if you can actually at this point you can develop, like, most similar or most different system design. So that's why perhaps, like, I'm perfectly fine with one case. And then method and data collections. So you need to tell me, how you're going to collect data, how you're going to master evidence, to increase, the explanatory evidence, of the data you collected. So if you claim that you're gonna conduct, interviews, so you need to write, to formulate some questions, and you have to revise or to go back to the lecture, I mentioned, how to formulate, these kind of questions, and to avoid, any kind of shortcoming of conducting interviews, and with whom as well. And if you're going to use, like, survey, like the available surveys, for example, so you need to specify what questions you're going to use in order to answer, to help you, like, collect data and evidence to answer your question. And then, like, you have a problem with the citation, so you need to revise, what kind of citation style you're going to apply, Harvard or Chicago or APA. I don't have, like, any preference. The thing is, you need to have, like, in-text citation or, like, footnotes, and then you have, like, end bibliography. So pay attention, because, like, it's one of the, like, evaluating criteria. So these are, like, the steps or the points I need to see in your research proposals. So I'll have, like, two examples from the literature review you submitted. So I came up with, like, different research questions. So I don't want to see these, like, questions in your final proposals, because otherwise you'll get, like, unfair advantage. So I'm gonna, like, explain how to design a research based on these, like, questions, and I referred you to some readings. So that's why I used the same readings I referred you to, but I need, like, more elaboration and different research question and different detection of the gap or the point of weakness in the literature, and different, like, case and methods as well. So for example, you are interested in education and political participation, so you can, like, offer, like, a short introduction about different, how, like, education, how literature or different studies actually tackled this relationship between education and political participation. by elaborating on how they actually specified, the correlation between education and SES, its social economic status of the individual, of the people, or how like education would affect like the civic norms and the engagement of citizens, and how education actually stimulates, high level of education stimulates active citizenship. So that's why they might, increase the level of political participation, or the level of political interest. And then you can highlight, there are kind of different forms of political participation, not only like electoral or voting in elections or turnout, but also like participating in demonstrations, in marches, for example, or contacting and signing petitions in order to pressure, the candidates or representatives in order to make them much more responsive to their own electoral districts. So you have to highlight, to give me like, an overview about what kind of debates or what kind of relationship, you are talking about, and like some hints, or brief remarks, on the definition, or what do you mean, the concepts, under investigation, what do you mean by political participation, and then straight to the question. For example, you need to know how education affects civic responsibility. You might, highlight, this in the introduction, and to define, the civic responsibility, like the stimulate kind of sense of political interest or political, efficacy, how people, they see themselves, effective, and they can actually have a say in the decision-making process. So you have this introduction, and then you have the question, and then you can, again, like the literature review you conducted, it's not about like, selecting, some studies, and then you can tell me the author A, for example, said blah blah blah, author B blah blah blah. It's not like this. You have to gather them in streams and trends, so you have different, group of studies. They talked about, the same issue, or perhaps from different angles, but they tackled, somehow the same issue. For example, here you can mention some studies that talked about the relationship between education and participation, but the causal, like, is still like the causal mechanisms, between political participation and education, like remain kind of hidden, or unsolved. It's kind of a hidden black box. For example, some studies, you have to group them into like, different trends. Like some talked about, political knowledge, how education actually would increase, individuals' political knowledge, how education would like create kind of political norms and values, or enhance particular civic skills acquired in school that actually would help with the increasing level of political participation. And then you will have like, criticism, like you have to criticize, like these studies actually focused on these concepts or these variables, but they don't actually unravel the mechanisms by which, the education might affect the political participation level. So how political knowledge actually would increase the level of political participation. How, like, acquiring the civic skills might increase, political participation, or motivate, this active citizenship, and create this sense of civic responsibility. And then you can move to the other, stream or other trend in the literature that actually focus on the how, like, it's not education itself in and of itself, but actually it was like a proxy for other variables. So it was like, proxy for like affiliation or membership in social networks, like, gender organizations or association, and religious associations. So it has, something to do with the socialization process, pre-adult, socialization process, and how people acquire, certain skills and political knowledge and norms, from engaging in these networks and associations and like, this kind of socialization, or like, proxy for the cognitive, the personality and the cognitive ability or political convictions of the person. So it's not only about education per se, it has more to do with the cognitive, and the political convictions of the individuals. If you have like different other streams, and then you can opt for like, you have an article here by a person, he talked about, or he referred to like in the literature that talked about the relative education model. So you might need to go to the like, the source of the, or the authors, or the who they coined, the concept, or the theoretical framework of relative education model. Yeah, at this stage, you don't need to develop your own theoretical framework. So you need like, you have like existing, theories and different analytical framework, and you need to apply this to your research problem to help you answer your puzzle or your research problem. So then like, you have like this relative education model. By focusing on, it's not like education, but it's more about like, social status, for example. And this like, acquiring by education, like individuals acquire certain or high, like, positions or social status that might be, they might get interested in politics, or might have like develop, this like, conviction about, their how effective, they are in the political process. So they develop, this sense of civic responsibility. So that's why they might, run for elections, like local or parliamentary or even presidential elections. So you have like different forms of political participation, or might, participate in political assemblies, the membership in like, any political rallies, or participation in political meetings, or getting access to decision-making circles. So depending on the definition you offered for the concept of political participation, so you have like here the theory in order to apply it to your research. And then you can have like the case and the methods. So perhaps, you need to focus on like university level or secondary school, depending on your dependent variable. Like, so you have like here civic responsibility, like, the membership in political parties, the membership in like participation in political meetings, or political assemblies, or like, vocalizing, criticism and challenge to the political regime, or getting access to like joining, some or organizing some lobbying events or activities in order to pressure, decision-making circles. So it depends. So you might have like, like particular, political parties, or you can have like university level students or secondary school, depends on, what's your variable, like, political norms, political knowledge, civic responsibility. So it would affect, the selection of the case. So for example, here, like, if you're interested in political knowledge and civic skills, so perhaps you might focus on university level student, or secondary schools. And then you can have like focus groups, or you design, surveys in order to get answers, or you can have like, interviews, or you can actually bring them two, or like, or three, you can apply them together, to your research to collect, some data. Yeah, the second example here, like media and voting behavior. So you might have like, an introduction, like you guys didn't actually tackle directly the topic. Some of you actually like revolved around other explanations regarding political culture and voting, rational choice, and the duty, the concept of duty, and why people actually vote in the elections out of, within the framework of their rationality or the rational choice. But you just briefly touched upon, the role of the media and voting behavior. The, that was like, I established, this example based on the comments, I offered as well. So please, like, don't use, you're not allowed actually to use the question here I phrased. So you have to come up with your own puzzling question. So here you can offer, like, brief introduction about the role of the media and politics. For example, how, like, some study, it's briefly, like, it's a brief introduction how media actually would affect, would have, like, a persuasive effect, on the voters, and how money and exposure to mobilizing campaigns would affect, the level of turnout in the elections. Um, and how the media actually played important role in filtering news and what's called spin doctoring, by highlighting, or by actually bringing to light what they want to bring to light, and hiding what would make, headlines, and what would be marginalized and relegated to the margin, or would, like, remain opaque. So you offer, this introduction, and how political campaigns, might have different, different effect with regard to turnout or voter choices, or the level of the participation as well. And then you can highlight something about what these studies actually do not, in order to introduce to your question, or to your, like, puzzling issue or puzzling question. So actually it didn't say a lot about, voter choice, whether or not, the media usually play important role in the voter, or determining, the choice of the voters, and how actually it didn't answer how they actually affected, or how it would affect the pre-existing, the beliefs and perceptions and values. And then you can introduce, like, it's kind of a sophisticated, voters or whatever, or voters with like, party identification, or ID, or with ideological conviction. So what kind of effect, the media might have on voters, on the choices, on the electoral choice. And then and actually we talk about, obviously, in democratic context. Okay, so it's like, when you have, like, kind of transparent and fair and free elections, so it's not applicable to any like authoritarian context that they might have, these elections and these kind of political campaigns for or they have, like, different mechanisms, how these campaigns actually work. And then you can, like, drill down to, like, after, like, the having the introduction, and then the question here, how does, like, party membership or party identification actually enhance pre-existing attitudes and beliefs. And then you drill down to the details on what kind of trends and streams in the literature. And then you can, like, highlight different streams, how actually some, like, studies focused on the direct effect of the media on the events. But you have, like, to offer try to offer kind of criticism to the points, they highlighted, and what kind of other points, they don't highlight. And then others, they focus on the political, the role of money, the role of, like, in financing, political campaigns, and how actually this would affect, like, media exposure, or the mobilizing, campaigns that would affect, the turnout level. And then you can introduce, like, what they didn't highlight, about, voter choices and pre-existing, beliefs and attitudes. And perhaps you can focus on, the theory here. You have different theories of media. So one of them, it talks about, priming, how actually the media would prime you to think in a certain way. So in a subtle but in a subtle way. So for example, if you have, like, if you need to, like, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, for the Labour Party, the candidates or the affiliated, you know, with the Labour Party, they are good at social policies and highlighting, you know, this kind of social inequality and poor public goods or social services. And so actually, like, if you have political campaigns or or electoral campaigns that, you know, focused in different districts about, you know, the quality of the national health insurance, for example, how it's kind of ineffective, like the taxation system, how it's kind of unfair, like the poor kind of quality of social services in some areas. So it kind of it would prime, you know, people to think in a certain way. And what you are trying to examine, even as, you know, like exposure, you know, to this kind of like media campaign or the electoral or the political campaign, would actually, it didn't affect, you know, the choice of the voter. If they have, like, you know, if they have like ideological conviction about like, you know, like conservative party, for example, in some districts, they would vote for the conservative candidates, not to the Labour candidates, despite of the exposure to these kind of issues on inequality and the level of, you know, poor quality of public services. So you can choose, like, you know, some electoral districts to focus on with, like, you know, some particular, you know, with time frame, like, you know, you have, like, you know, different, like, particular elections, you know, you're focusing on, and then what kind of methods, you know, you're gonna apply to your research, perhaps like survey or survey data or public opinion, you know, surveys or opinion polls, like that they were actually famous before the elections, and content analysis of different, you know, media messages, you know, how, you know, they offer this. Yeah. So we are doing this, and we are actually talking about like scientific research methods. Why do we bother to have, like, you know, scientific research design, or applying kind of scientific methods in order to generate the only thing is, like, here the main purpose is, like, to test your hypotheses and to answer your research question. So actually, why we do bother, or why we are interested in, like, this scientific, you know, research methods as, like, the only way perhaps to go about, you know, discovering and generating scientific knowledge. Yeah. And in the readings here, in the like, I assigned, you know, to this course, so the readings actually touched upon, like, Popper and falsification and Lakatos and the research problem, and they hinted at, you know, Thomscon and the paradigm shift. I mean, I'll briefly, kind of, believe me, this is, like, you know, I'm just, like, scratching the surface. So I'll briefly, like, go in some detail about, you know, these concepts, and how actually they tried, you know, to they applied to natural sciences, and they tried to make social sciences, including, you know, political science, as kind of scientific, and how it would produce, you know, scientific knowledge as well. So before, like, the kind of the predominant, you know, trend was, like, the hypothetical inductive model. It was like a process by which, if you remember when we talked about inductive and deductive, you know, modes. So it's a kind of, it was like, you know, the inductive, you know, tools or methods, tended to predominate. So the thing is, if you have like, kind of hypotheses and you try, to collect evidence in order to test and to verify the hypothesis, this would yield to like, accurate and true results. So if it's kind of empirically verified, any kind of hypothesis or proposition, to be true or accurate, it has the proposition has to be empirically verified. So it came from like, this kind of verificationalism, tradition, and how they would link, how the outcomes actually would define, the subject. So actually, this kind of inductive, in like inductive mode was totally rejected, by Popper, and offering instead in his the logic of scientific discovery, he offered, the notion of falsification in order to replace. So he rejected, this kind of verificationalism and induction, and he replaced them with the deduction and falsification. So for example, the main goal here, it's the opposite. It's not like, to master evidence or to collect some evidence to prove, the theory, like to be true, but it was actually to collect evidence in order to that would like prove the theory to be false. So it's a falsifiability, not verificationalism, is the crux here of the matter of like producing, theories and scientific knowledge. And he offered some example about, if you have like, this thesis about are all swans, white? So instead of like, collecting, evidence to show or to prove that all like swans are white, so this would increase, the likelihood, of the thesis, to be true. But the question is how to find if like one black swan, you're gonna find, one black swan. So this would immediately falsify your thesis. So for him, like, for science and scientific methods, in order to establish kind of norms and rules to guide, the researchers, it's not like it's all about, how to establish, a theory that would stand kind of what he mentioned, harsh test, in order to that's like, by nature falsifiable. And it's not like, pure objective truth, because it always, subjects to a falsifiability. And he actually why actually he rejected, this induction mode of collecting, evidence, or to link, this kind of empirical context with the observations. Because for him, what he mentioned, this would actually trigger what he called the demarcation, the problem of demarcation, or the demarcating criteria. So for him, there is kind of a conflation between psychology of knowledge and the logic of knowledge. So you cannot follow, this induction model without sidelining, your experience, or how you experience, the world, how you marshal evidence in order to test your hypothesis. So kind of genuine knowledge, it has to be independent of your personal experience. Otherwise, there would be like, conflation between, the psychology, your experience, and the logic of knowledge. So it's not about, the validity, or how to establish, this kind of truthful or universal statement that inevitably actually will be based on your experience, or your logically testified or logically linked, through what's known by your experience. So the thing is, how to demarcate, how to make a distinction between um, what's scientific or the scientific knowledge, and what is metaphysical, as he mentioned, that actually emanated from or what by your experience. So that's the thing, it's the induction that actually link evidence, or link this kind of empirical context, of collecting evidence to observation, the empirical content, of this actually is not separable from what you did know by your experience. So this triggers the induction mode, actually triggers this criteria of like demarcation. So so falsifiability would offer this kind of criterion of demarcation, because you hear presumably it's not presumably, as in there exists kind of infinite number of logically possible worlds. So it's not a matter, as I mentioned, to reach this kind of universal statement, truthful universal statement, but it has to do how to reach a theory that might be falsifiable, that would stand to be compared to different theories, and to stand this falsifiable test. So induction, actually, by offering by validating or verifying this one only real world, it was a world of your experience, not actually, it's not you didn't establish this demarcating line between the real world and the world you get to know by your experience. So the thing is how to establish rules and norms in order to guide researchers while engaging in discovery, or while engaging in the research, in order to deal with the scientific methods or scientific systems. That was the crux of or the central point of his message, or the analysis. So he focused on this context of discovery by elaborating on this kind of norms and rules that would guide the discovery and the research, and then how to test, how to establish kind of rules that would say something about to what extent your theory actually stands or withstands the harsh test of falsifiability. So he actually he mentioned four elements or four kind of criteria. So the theory, it's all about, as I mentioned, it's all about how to establish this kind of scientific systems, how to establish how to reach or to build a theory rather than reaching pure objective truth. So here, the thesis or the theory has to be logically or internally consistent. So it doesn't carry any kind of internal contradictions. So you cannot say people behave rationally and irrationally in social mobilization, for example. So if you feel X exists, so it doesn't mean I cannot derive a statement that X does not exist as well. So it had to be internally consistent. So if the people are motivated by purely self-interested self-interest demands, so you cannot mention something about sacrifice or other contradictory concepts that maybe that would make the theory internally inconsistent or incoherent. Internally, it's not internally consistent. And then logical form of the theory, it's logically falsifiable. So if you remember the example I offered, I highlighted, by referring to Green and Shapiro in their work on pathologies of the rational choice, when they mentioned something about, how the rational choice as a theory, it's not falsifiable, because for them, for like proponents of rational choice, it's kind of people are motivated by people are like self-interested, so they have like they have like their own they have their own motivation to act kind of to maximize their benefits and minimize their cost. And we know this must be true because we see this in actions. Like if you like examine individuals, like they vote for some particular candidates because they are rational, because this will increase their economic well-being, for example. And we know this because we see this in actions, because they already voted for the candidate that the offered an economic program that would increase or improve their economic well-being. So it's not like falsifiable, because when they see like other new facts that they do not actually fit into the theoretical or the theory they offered, so they added ad hoc assumptions or actually post hoc assumptions when they found some people that they are actually altruistic, so they might prefer the interests of others, beloved ones, than their own interests, for example. So they actually they went back to the motivational model, and they added one other element. So it's not tautological, and it's not falsifiable by adding this ad hoc and post hoc assumptions. And then the comparison between different theories, like between the theory you built and other theories. And for him, actually, it's not like because we're gonna mention later, like some like Lakatos, for example, and Kohn, for example, mentioned something about the how different theories or competing theories or paradigms, actually they are mutually exclusive. But for Popper here, they are not like exclude one another, but the best theory or the new theory has to specify or has to come up with like some specific predictions that actually the other theories or the existing or the old theories fail to predict. And the best criteria of evaluation has to be like universal and precise, so it's applicable to different to wide array of cases, and it has to be like precise. If you speak of like X causes Y, it has to be like very precise. And then parsimonious means it contains like fewer elements in order to make these kind of predictions. So you need here to establish theory about civic responsibility or civic culture. So you have like this participation or socialization process in engaging with the engagement in religious associations or gender associations, for example. It depends. And then how this affects the civic culture or the civic responsibility of women in certain city or whatever. So the fewer, but it's again, it's very difficult in political science. So that's why it's very hard to even rational choice, when it claims to reach this position. It, as I mentioned, some other scholars actually criticize rational choice as a theory, as unfalsifiable theory. So it's very difficult to find in social science and in political science. So they actually just approach, they try to approach, this bar. And by having like few elements in order to facilitate or to make these predictions possible, and then the empirical applications, it has to be like empirically applicable to some cases. So if you mentioned like the profit maximization and cost minimization, so it has to be like applicable to economic voting, for example, or the electoral turnout. So it had to be like it has to have empirical application. And for him, like if the like this is quote unquote, like if the theories actually withstand this detailed and severe test, so it has to be, it has to prove its metal, or it's kind of corroborated. So verified, and for him again, like verified conclusions, it doesn't mean like it's true, or even it's not like a universal, it's not like a truthful statement, but it's kind of temporarily a candidate for truth until some more evidence would be collected to falsify the existing. As I mentioned, like the Russian truth, the only thing in political science actually that's kind of elevated to this position, but actually it has again some it received some harsh criticism, especially the most like famous one came from Green and Shapiro about this tautological nature and unfalsifiability. So comparing against the criteria even Popper offered. Yeah, and Kohn here, he talked about the paradigm model in his like the structure of scientific revolution. So again, it's perhaps like in natural sciences, and in political science, like the community of the scholars, they didn't reach this stage. So he actually talked about normal science. It's a kind of a paradigm or a worldview shared by particular scientific community, that they actually embrace scientific or specific understanding, or share, they have like this shared understanding of how the world actually operates, and what the world actually looks like, or what's like, what the world is like. So for him, like the history of science, it's a history of a scientific revolutions, and periodic kind of alternation between different paradigms. So by paradigm here, it's like the community, the agreed on specific facts and theories like that would interpret or explain these facts, and different methodological tools and solving the major puzzles, or the major problems in particular field. And then like the paradigm shift happens when crisis emerged by like the existing paradigm, this kind of shared understanding, and the agreement on the facts and tools, and the solutions of the major puzzles that actually have never happened in political science, although they tried repeatedly to do that. But it was like better at a new paradigm like emerged in order to explain some new problems, and then they would establish some by these facts they had like their own tools, their own like theories to match the theories with the facts, and then to offer a solution to the major puzzles. So the new one, it's not kind of an extension of the old paradigm, and for him it's kind of mutually the new and the old paradigms are mutually exclusive. So as I mentioned, it's not applicable to political science because like even I think Almond he talked about like separate tables in political science or a discipline divide. The book entitled I think a discipline divide. It was like you had like different traditions, and these different traditions actually they are not like mutually exclusive. They do exist, and they do like produce, you know, quote unquote like scientific knowledge. So the kind of yeah, and as he mentioned, like the new paradigm, they might, you know, find some resistance from the scholarly or the from the scientific community that would resist, you know, the this kind of unexpected discovery, and would treat, you know, would like, you know, inclined to treat the new facts or the new tools or the new theories as kind of like, you know, the anomalous or anomaly. So it entails, you know, this kind of the crisis. It entails kind of tenacity that actually resisted and any kind of new paradigm, and to reestablish or reproduce the old one. So in political science, it's kind of it's not like there is no kind of incommensurability he talked about, because, you know, some explanations actually complement each other. So they have like this complementary nature, and they are like, you know, quite they do exist. And sometimes, you know, they do some synthesis between different interpretations or different explanations or different tools and different theories. So and scholars, you know, as a community, they don't agree, you know, on specific problems, you know, to be tackled, like the history of the political science. They had like, you know, some focus before on the like legal or the formal institutions, and then with the Cold War, on the emergence of the post-colonial states, they had like, you know, new issues or new problems, you know, to be solved. So like they deal with like human behavior, so that's why it would be very difficult to establish, you know, this kind of a monopoly of a particular paradigm. It's kind of the quantitative and behavioralism, and the still like the positivistic, you know, notion of science still like it dominates, but it doesn't like, you know, eliminate, you know, the existence, or it doesn't deny the existence of other like, you know, methodological tools or other like theoretical traditions, as I hinted at, you know, the discourse analysis or the postmodernism, as we are going to see. And for like if we kind of compare quickly between Popper and the falsification and like the paradigm shift, the two notions or the two ideas. So here, Con here actually didn't believe, or he didn't say something about, you know, falsification, because when he mentioned something about, you know, the resistance of the tenacity or the resistance of the old paradigms, actually he it doesn't, it means that the emergence of new facts or new theories does not lead automatically to the rejection of the existing theories or the existing it's not paradigm, but the existing theories, because like it would face, you know, kind of resistance and would be treated as anomalies. And like for like, you know, this kind of if theories, you know, old and new, they are comparable or not. For Popper, actually, they are comparable, and the new theory is better at like, you know, offering, you know, like, you know, it's better at, you know, making prediction rather than the old ones. But here they are like, you know, they are not comparable, you know, for Thomscombe. Like the old one or the new one is not the logical extension of the old one. Yeah, it actually trashes it altogether. And for Popper, for example, he focuses on the logic of the discovery, and here Kant actually focused on the history or perhaps, you know, the sociology of the establishing, you know, kind of communities in scientific fields. And then you have like Lakatos. He talked about, you know, the methodology of scientific research programs. okay, for him, actually, he tried to offer more kind of sophisticated, methodological for methodological tools or methodological rules for falsification. And he sided with Kohn with the tenacity of the like old theories or old paradigm, that they are not we cannot actually refute them or falsify. They are not like easily falsifiable. And so he actually offered or introduced, this concept about scientific research programs. And the scientific program is the progressive one, that actually would interpret and explain and predict new facts. And the pseudoscientific or degenerating or the degenerate program actually failed to predict, some new facts. So for him, like any research program, it has like three components. The hardcore, it's kind of the assumptions and kind of a set of methodological rules that would specify or would guide researchers what to pursue and what not to pursue, for example. And what he called like a protective belt of auxiliary hypotheses. This actually, it protected the theory against like any falsifying, element of the core. So by altering, these kind of auxiliary hypotheses, they protect, the theory from falsification or from being falsifiable. How this would actually happen through what he called like, this heuristics, positive and negative. The heuristics, it's kind of a machinery or the problem solving tools. So you have like the negative one, that actually they protect the bar, that would protect the hardcore of the assumptions and the set of the methodological rules of any research program. I'm going to apply this shortly to like one application of the rational choice model. And then the positive heuristics are like these kind of elements or the tools, they are testable. So by actually playing with the heuristic, the positive, heuristics and altering, this kind of auxiliary hypothesis, you can save, the research program, and you make it, much more, or you make it, scientific or progressive to predict the new facts. It's actually, again, it's difficult in political science if you apply this, like, this is like, if the rational choice is the standard, if you apply this even to the rational choice theory, it would be very difficult to determine what's the hardcore and what's like the auxiliary hypotheses and the heuristics. But we try, to apply this to rational choice, because as an attempt, from political science quote unquote community to produce, scientific tools and to apply scientific methods to produce or to generate scientific knowledge. And then he mentioned something about like, normal science, about Cohn's notion about normal science. Here it's a monopoly of a particular research program. Like, it's very hard to falsify. You need to protect it from any falsifying element. You need to protect the core through, this belt of auxiliary hypotheses. Okay, so if we apply this to I'm not sure if you have heard of this, like the Downsian model of median voter. It's like, economic model of voting. So the whole point, or the main point here, you have like two ideological parties, one on the right and one on the left, and they compete in order to maximize, voters, in order to assume office, to get into like, power centers. So the main assumptions here, like, the political parties are kind of rational players. So that's why they need to maximize, votes to reach office. So that's why it's like the median voter here, the percentage, or the largest, you know, percentage of voters, you know, um, lies in this area. So that's why they move a little bit, you know, from like far left and far right towards, you know, the center, in order, you know, to move a little bit towards, you know, the without reaching the center, in order to attract, you know, more voters. Because actually you have here the dark gray. If they stick to their, like, you know, radical leftist ideology, for example, they would gain, like, you know, the votes from these people, some people. Okay, but like most people here, they would maximize this by reaching out to the median voter, the light gray area. And the same, you know, for the right as well. um yeah, there is kind of, like, it does exist, like, in political science, but the whole notion or the pattern, actually, for some scholars, actually, it was like based on stylized facts, or it was a matter of post hoc theorization. And then you see this, like, you know, you see these kind of facts, and then you start theorizing this as a pattern, as a pattern of voting. So perhaps if you need to apply, you know, the research program, like Lakato's notion of research program to this, like, medium voter model. So perhaps, like, the hardcore here is rationality again, rationality of both. Because here we are talking about, like, the positions of political parties, how they shift their position from, like, you know, far left towards, you know, the median voter, and far right towards the median voter. And the rationality of the political parties to attract or to maximize votes to reach office, and then the rationality of the voter as well to vote for the elections that would actually offer them, you know, some benefits, or would improve on their economic well-being. So it's kind of a simultaneous focus on both, like, you know, voting based on identification, partisan identification, and party electoral positioning on the axis. So here, see, the theory actually tried, or the model actually tried to theorize for both, like, you know, political parties as a rational player. They actually try to position themselves, you know, in this kind of multi-dimensional space, in order to attract more voters. And voters as well, like, they have, like, you know, some like, you know, identification with political parties. So that's why they would vote for the party they would, like, you know, affiliate with, or with the identify, you know, themselves with. um okay, but some other, like, you know, this is like the hardcore, but some new facts actually like emerged, and they did exist. And this kind of model, or this kind of research program, actually did not predict. So can we speak of, like, you know, the degenerate, you know, model of median voter, because it failed to predict, you know, some new facts, according to Lakatos. So here, like, you know, sometimes you have, like, you know, some other studies, you know, try to deal with these new facts, because sometimes, you know, it's more about issue positions or issue dimensions, rather than party identification. So it's more about like, you know, it's not about like identifying with like leftist parties or right-wing parties. It has more to do with some issue or new issue dimensions that might emerge. For example, like, you have, like, you know, coronavirus, new issues, you know, and then you have elections with different, you know, candidates. So it has nothing to do with the with the left and right, or ideological identification or partisan identification, but it has more to do with the quality of, like, health insurance and the public services, for example. So some, like, new dimensions with uncertainty. So you don't know, like, beforehand, like, these people that might, they have, like, propensity or inclination, towards, the leftist party, they would go for a leftist candidate with some sort of uncertainty here. Or you have, like, parties with different, abilities to shape preferences. So perhaps, like, you have, like, some voters without any party ID, or with any ideological identification, and then you have, like, some parties that they are like, they are good at, like, shaping these preferences for voters. So the model actually didn't predict, these kind of facts. Or you have, like, the emergence of some small parties, like, extreme right wingers, or like, the populist right, for example, that they would position, themselves, of the axis. It's totally, like, it's not, they don't position themselves here at all. So it was, like, away from, these two major political parties. And actually there's an assumption here that you have, like, two major political parties, that they dominated, the political landscape, in order to compete, for, or to contest for more votes. So again, like, some people, like, would say it's kind of a degenerate, research program, but others actually they didn't, because they still apply, the model to interpret or to explain, some economic voting, or the behavior of political parties, and behavior of the behavior of some voters as well. Yeah, so the whole point here, you have, like, some trends, they try to tackle with the, like, to introduce, some framework or some rules and norms for researchers to make, scientific research through scientific tools or scientific methods to produce scientific knowledge. And you have, like, different trends, or different perspectives here, and we try to apply this to political science, but actually it's not, like, it doesn't perfectly, fit in the political science as a subfield of as a field of discipline. And but, like, we try, as I mentioned, like, you can, like, you can increase, this level of objectivity. You can actually triangulate, different methods. You can do your best if you apply, like, quantitative and qualitative. So pay attention to this kind of measurement and question formulation, in order to achieve kind of objectivity. And again, there's, like, in social science, you deal with human behavior. So perhaps, like, what Popper mentioned, it's not, like, pure or absolute truth, but you can actually approach, some level of objectivity. And yeah, I'm not gonna spend, like, time on this, but you have, like, I touched upon, like, discourse analysis and different kind of methodological tools that are applied actually in political science, and some others, in anthropology. So you have here, if you remember when I talked about the discourse analysis, I mentioned, I actually I referred to David Howard. He actually rejected, this notion of epistemological irrationalism and like methodological anarchism. The idea actually introduced by Fireband. I think, I'm not sure if I pronounce his name correctly, but he wrote, like, a book on against methods. And the whole point with writing, this piece was to free, as I mentioned, like quote unquote, to free people from any kind of abstract concepts and such. He rejected, these notions of reality, objectivity, and truth. And this would narrow, people's vision and ways of being in the world. So actually, for him, like anything goes. He rejected, this notion of following, some rules, or having like some sort of steps or rules to follow in order to produce, scientific knowledge. Yeah, I personally, it does exist, but I personally don't believe, in this. Otherwise, we cannot have like, it's pointless, to have like a course to spend like, a few months explaining like, scientific research method and what does it mean, what we mean by scientific research method. But anyway, it does exist. But even within, this tradition, you have like, some sort of like, opponents that rejected, this kind of anarchism and epistemological irrationalism, as like, the book by Howard on discourse, and actually how they tried, to have like, certain steps, or to have like, logical structure without, assuming they are establishing any kind of causality between two variables. But they tried, to follow, some clear rules in order to apply, this discourse analysis to like social institutions, and how actually different power structures manage to reproduce, their dominant positions, or how actually different movements or different other like, social institutions emerged after resisting, the predominant ones. But they actually, they don't establish causality. They actually talked about something about, interpretation, how they would interpret, certain discourse, or certain, reproduction of the same power structures, or same norms and social institutions in society. So anyway, it does exist. And as I mentioned, like, you have like, positivistic and neo-positivistic that actually try to deal, with the issues of like, objectivity and scientific tools. And if you remember the table I think it was in week 1, it was like from Della Porta, Donatella Della Porta, the book by Della Porta. You have one in the middle, like, and the readings actually hinted at, critical realism, how the, and I explained this in week 1, how they actually, they had, this ontological and epistemological position that they believe in, like, the objective reality, it's out there and independent of individuals' experience. And now actually they might, they can, researchers, they can diversify tools in order to lurk beneath, the surface, because, some other, hidden or dimensions or hidden elements are there. So they needed, some other tools, not necessarily quantifiable, in order to dig deep, or to dig even deeper in order to investigate, social and political phenomena. So hopefully it's the end of the course, and you should spend some time writing your research proposal. I'm gonna post, so here you have, some sort of guidance and instructions, what kind of points you need to cover, and you need to, like, to spend some time working on them. And perhaps I'll get back to the online discussion perhaps tomorrow, and we might have, I'm still thinking about like online meeting in order to discuss, if you have any other queries or any other questions. So hopefully, like, you learned something from the course, and let me know if you have more questions or any other queries regarding your research proposal. Okay, bye.